The sun had barely begun its descent when the first whisper of unease swept through the small town of Dustmere. It was a place where silence often reigned, interrupted only by the occasional creak of a windmill or the distant call of a hawk circling high above the barren landscape. The townsfolk were accustomed to solitude, their lives revolving around the harsh realities of survival in the unforgiving desert that surrounded them. But tonight, something felt different. A tension hung heavy in the air, as if the earth itself knew what was coming. At the edge of town, near the old barn that stood weathered and worn like an ancient sentinel, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a horse. No ordinary horse, but one known to every soul in Dustmere. Her name was Midnight, though she bore no resemblance to her namesake now. Her coat, one sleek and black as polished onyx, was matted with dirt and streaked with sweat. Her eyes, wide and fearful, darted nervously as she stumbled toward the barn. What made the sight all the more unsettling was the saddle upon her back, empty yet dripping wet. Until this moment, the people of Dustmere believed Midnight lost forever. She belonged to Clara Hayes, the daughter of the town's blacksmith, who had vanished 3 days ago under mysterious circumstances. Clara had taken Midnight out for a ride at dawn, promising to return before noon. But neither rider nor horse returned that day, or the next, or the one after that. Search parties scoured the desert, their hopes fading with each passing hour. By the third night, most had given up, assuming the worst, that Clara had fallen victim to the dangers lurking beyond Dustmere's borders. But then, little did they know, Midnight's return would bring not just questions but answers, and those answers carried secrets buried deep within the heart of the Wild West. As the horse approached the barn, her hooves kicked up clouds of dust that danced briefly in the fading light before settling back onto the parched earth. The sound drew the attention of Thomas Reed, the town sheriff, who was sitting on the steps of his office, polishing his revolver with a rag. His brow furrowed as he recognized Midnight, and he rose quickly to his feet, holstering his weapon as he strode toward her. "Midnight," he murmured, his voice tinged with both relief and suspicion. "Where have you been, girl? And where's Clara?" He reached out cautiously, examining the saddle more closely. The leather was soaked, water still dripping from it despite the arid heat of the desert. It didn't make sense. How could a horse wander so far into the wilderness and come back drenched? Before he could ponder further, voices echoed behind him. Several townsfolk had noticed a commotion and gathered nearby, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. Among them was Samuel Hayes, Clara's father, his face pale and drawn with worry. When he saw Midnight, his hands clenched into fists, knuckles whitening with emotion. "My girl," he whispered, stepping forward hesitantly. "What has happened to my girl?" No one dared ask aloud what they all feared, that Midnight had returned alone, because Clara was gone, perhaps forever. Instead, they watched silently as Sheriff Reed examined the horse more thoroughly, searching for any clue that might explain her absence. There were no signs of injury on Midnight, no bloodstains or torn reins. Yet there was something about her demeanor that set everyone on edge, a quiet desperation in her movements, as though she were trying to tell them something they couldn't understand. The sky darkened rapidly as twilight gave way to night, and the stars began to twinkle faintly overhead. A cool breeze stirred the dry grasses surrounding the barn, carrying with it the faint scent of rain, though none had fallen for weeks. In the distance, the low growl of thunder rumbled, a harbinger of storms yet to come. Sheriff Reed lit a lantern, its golden glow casting long shadows across the ground. He led Midnight into the barn, where she immediately sought out a corner, lowering her head wearily onto a pile of hay. For a moment, she seemed content, her breathing steady and calm. But then, without warning, she lifted her head abruptly, ears perked forward, nostrils flaring. Whatever had spooked her remained unseen, hidden in the darkness outside. Thomas Reed frowned, gripping the lantern tightly. "Something's not right here," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder at the assembled crowd. "We need to find out what happened to Clara, and fast." Samuel Hayes nodded grimly. "I'll go with you," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor of fear beneath it. "If anything has happened to my daughter, I want to be the one to bring her home." Reluctantly, the others agreed, forming a makeshift posse armed with lanterns, rifles, and determination. As they prepared to follow Midnight's trail, the storm clouds gathered overhead, their ominous shapes blotting out the moonlight. Lightning flashed intermittently, illuminating the desolate landscape in stark relief. Each bolt revealed new details. The jagged cliffs rising to the north, the meandering riverbed that twisted like a serpent through the valley below, and the dense thicket of mesquite trees that marked the boundary between civilization and the untamed wilds. It was late when they finally set off, following the faint tracks left by Midnight's hooves in the soft sand. The journey was slow and arduous, the terrain treacherous even in daylight. Shadows loomed larger than life, playing tricks on weary minds. More than once, someone swore they heard laughter carried on the wind, or the soft padding of footsteps trailing behind them. But when they turned to investigate, nothing was there. Hours passed, and the group pressed onward, driven by hope and desperation. They crossed a riverbed, its bedrock slick with moisture from recent rains, and entered the forest of mesquite trees. Here, the air grew cooler, and the scent of damp earth replaced the dry heat of the desert. Owls hooted softly from their perches, while smaller creatures scurried through the underbrush, unseen but ever present. Deeper into the woods they ventured, until they reached a clearing bathed in silvery moonlight. At its center stood an old well, its wooden frame weathered and cracked with age. Around it lay scattered remnants of campfires long extinguished, along with broken bottles and discarded tools. It was clear that someone or something had used this place as a hideout. Midnight stopped abruptly, her body trembling as she stared at the well. Her whinnies were sharp and panicked, reverberating through the stillness of the night. Sheriff Reed stepped closer, peering down into the darkness below. The depth was impossible to gauge, but the smell rising from it was unmistakable, musty and foul, laced with decay. Could she have fallen in? Samuel Hayes asked, his voice trembling. "Clara, I mean?" "It's possible," Thomas replied, though doubt lingered in his tone. He retrieved a rope from his saddlebag, securing one end to a sturdy branch overhead. With care, he lowered himself into the well, lantern held high to light his descent. The walls were slick with moss, and loose stones crumbled beneath his boots, sending cascades of debris tumbling into the abyss below. When he reached the bottom, his breath caught in his throat. There, amidst the rubble and stagnant water, lay evidence of struggle, shattered pieces of wood, strands of hair tangled in the roots of plants, and most disturbingly, a single boot, its sole mud-caked and frayed. But no sign of Clara herself. Refusing to give up, Sheriff Reed called out her name repeatedly, his voice echoing against the stone walls. Silence answered him, unbroken save for the dripping of water from somewhere unseen. Frustration mounted as he climbed back out, joining the others above ground. "We've got to keep looking," he declared, though his expression betrayed his growing unease. "She can't be far." And so they pressed on, guided now by instinct rather than tracks. Midnight remained close, her presence a constant reminder of the reason they continued their search. The hours dragged on, turning into dawn, and still there was no sign of Clara. But then, just as the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, revealing the world anew, a cry rang out, a cry filled with pain and terror. It came from deeper within the forest, cutting through the morning stillness like a blade. Without hesitation, the group raced toward the sound, hearts pounding with dread and anticipation. They found her not far from the edge of the woods, slumped against a tree trunk, her clothing torn and her face streaked with tears. Her eyes were wide with shock, and her hands clutched desperately at the fabric of her shirt as though trying to hold herself together. Midnight stood protectively beside her, nuzzling her shoulder gently. "Clara!" Samuel Hayes cried, rushing to his daughter's side. He gathered her into his arms, rocking her back and forth as she sobbed uncontrollably. Relief washed over the group, mingling with confusion. How had she survived? Where had she been all these days? Slowly, haltingly, Clara began to speak, her words fragmented and strained. She told them of being ambushed by bandits near the riverbed, how they had stolen her gun and tied her hands, dragging her into the forest. She spoke of escaping during the night, using a rock to cut her bonds and running blindly through the darkness until midnight found her again. Yet even as she recounted her ordeal, there was something missing from her story, something she refused to say aloud, something that haunted her dreams and kept her awake at night. And though the others didn't press her further, they exchanged knowing glances, sensing that the truth was far more complex and far more dangerous than she let on. For now, however, the reunion was enough. Together, they made their way back to Dustmere, Clara cradled safely in her father's arms, Midnight walking steadily beside them. Behind them, the forest loomed silent and watchful, its secrets buried deep beneath layers of time and mystery. As the sun rose higher, casting golden beams across the land, the people of Dustmere welcomed their lost daughter home with open arms. But deep down, they knew that the events of those fateful days would linger in their memories, a reminder that even in the wildest corners of the West, some mysteries remain unsolved, and some truths too terrible to bear. As the days turned into weeks, Clara Hayes found herself unable to shake the lingering shadows of her ordeal. Though she had returned safely to Dustmere, her mind remained trapped in the forest, replaying every moment of fear and desperation. Her nights were restless, plagued by vivid dreams that left her gasping for air, drenched in sweat. The townsfolk noticed a change in her demeanor, how she flinched at sudden noises, how her once bright eyes now carried a haunted look, but they attributed it to the trauma of her experience. Little did they know, there was more to Clara's silence than mere shock. Midnight, too, seemed different since their return. Once a spirited and lively horse, she now moved with an almost ghostly quietness, her ears twitching nervously at sounds no one else could hear. She refused to enter the woods, even when coaxed gently by Clara, and would often stand at the edge of the forest, staring intently into its depths as though searching for something or someone. It was as if the mare had witnessed things beyond comprehension, secrets buried deep within the heart of the wilderness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Clara sat alone on the porch of her family's modest home. Her fingers absently traced the scars on her wrists, reminders of the ropes that had bound her during those dark hours. Samuel, her father, had tried countless times to coax her into speaking about what truly happened in the forest, but she always deflected his questions with vague answers. She couldn't bring herself to tell him. Not yet. Not until she understood it herself. The sound of hooves approaching drew her attention, and she looked up to see Sheriff Thomas Reed riding toward her. He dismounted gracefully, his boots kicking up a small cloud of dust as he walked over to join her on the porch. His face bore a mix of concern and determination, lines etched deeper from sleepless nights spent pondering the mystery of Clara's disappearance. "Evening, Clara," he greeted softly, taking a seat beside her. "How you holding up?" Clara offered a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm managing, Sheriff. Thank you for asking." Thomas nodded, his gaze drifting toward Midnight, who grazed peacefully in the nearby pasture. "That horse of yours sure caused quite a stir when she came back without you. Never seen anything like it. Her saddle all wet, like she'd been swimming through a river or something. Any idea why that might have happened?" Clara hesitated, her hands tightening around the railing of the porch. She remembered the cold water, soaking her clothes, the weight of Midnight's panic as they fled through the torrential rain. But explaining any of it would mean revealing far more than just the story of her escape. Instead, she shrugged lightly. "Maybe she crossed a stream somewhere. I don't really know, Sheriff." He studied her carefully, sensing the hesitation in her voice. "You know, Clara, I ain't going to push you to talk if you're not ready. But whatever happened out there, if it's still both there in you, you can trust me. You got the whole town rooted in for you." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you, Sheriff. That means a lot." For a while, they sat in silence, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the velvet black sky. The night air carried with it the faint scent of pine and earth, a soothing contrast to the oppressive heat of the day. Yet despite the tranquility, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, something hidden in the darkness, waiting patiently for its moment. The following morning brought with it a new discovery. While tending to Midnight, Clara noticed something unusual about her mare's mane. It was tangled with strands of unfamiliar hair, coarse and wiry, unlike anything she had ever seen before. Curious, She pulled one free and examined it closely under the light of the rising sun. The strand shimmered oddly, almost metallic in appearance, and when she sniffed it, she detected a strange, acrid smell. Her heart raced as memories flooded back. The figure she had glimpsed in the forest, cloaked in shadow, its presence both terrifying and mesmerizing. She hadn't dared speak of it to anyone, fearing they wouldn't believe her. But now, holding this peculiar piece of evidence, she knew she had to find answers. Summoning her courage, Clara made her way to the sheriff's office, the strand of hair clutched tightly in her hand. When she arrived, Thomas was already busy sorting through papers and maps spread across his desk. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening upon seeing her. "Clara," he said warmly, "what brings you here so early?" Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer and placed a strand of hair on his desk. "Sheriff, I need your help." This came from Midnight's mane. "I think it belongs to whoever, or whatever, took me." Thomas picked up the strand carefully, inspecting it with furrowed brows. "This is unusual," he admitted. "I've never seen anything like it. Where exactly did you say you found it?" "In the forest," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "When those men attacked me, there was something else there, something I didn't tell anyone about." His sharp intake of breath told her he was listening intently. Encouraged, she continued, "It wasn't human, Sheriff. At least, I don't think it was. It moved too fast, too silently. And its eyes, they glowed like lanterns in the dark. It scared off the bandits, but then it chased us, too. Midnight, and I barely escaped." Thomas set the strand of hair down slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. Legends of creatures lurking in the wilds were common enough in the West, but most dismissed them as mere superstition. Still, the evidence before him and the sincerity in Clara's voice was impossible to ignore. "We'll figure this out, Clara," he promised, standing to retrieve a magnifying glass from a drawer. "But first, we need to gather more information. Do you remember where exactly this thing appeared? Was it near the well?" Clara nodded, shivering at the memory. "Yes, it came out of nowhere right after the bandits tied me up. They ran screaming, leaving everything behind. But then it started chasing us, and Midnight bolted straight into the storm." "A storm," Thomas mused. That explained the wet saddle. But what kind of creature could survive such conditions, let alone thrive in them? Their investigation led them back to the forest, armed with lanterns and rifles, though neither expected to encounter a mysterious entity again so soon. As they approached the clearing with the old well, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. Midnight whinnied anxiously, refusing to step closer, even when Clara pleaded with her. Circling the well, Thomas examined the ground for fresh tracks or signs of disturbance. To his surprise, he discovered claw-like markings etched into the soft dirt, their shape unlike anything he'd seen before. Beside them lay fragments of metal, rusted but unmistakably forged by skilled hands. "What do you make of this?" Clara asked, pointing to the markings. Thomas shook his head, frustration evident in his tone. "I don't know, Clara, but whatever it is, it's smarter and stronger than we thought." They spent hours searching the area, uncovering additional clues. Broken branches twisted unnaturally, scorch marks on tree trunks, and even a crude symbol carved in the bark of one particularly large mesquite. The symbol resembled an eye surrounded by jagged lines, radiating outward like lightning bolts. Back in town, Thomas consulted old books and maps, hoping to identify the markings. One passage caught his attention. A Native American legend about a guardian spirit known as the Shadow Walker, said to protect sacred lands from intruders. According to the tale, the Shadow Walker took many forms, adapting to its surroundings, and only revealed itself to those who trespassed too deeply into its domain. Could the creature in the forest be the Shadow Walker? And if so, why had it spared Clara and Midnight? Days turned into another week, and tensions in Dustmere rose as word spread of the strange occurrences in the forest. Some believed the stories, attributing them to ancient curses or supernatural forces. Others dismissed them as fanciful tales spun by frightened minds. Regardless, the townsfolk began avoiding the woods altogether, leaving the boundary between civilization and wilderness eerily quiet. Clara, however, couldn't stay away. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and guilt, she ventured into the forest once more, determined to confront whatever awaited her. Midnight followed reluctantly, her instincts warning her against entering the forbidden zone. But Clara urged her forward, knowing the mare's bond with her was stronger than fear. Deeper into the woods they went, the light filtering through the canopy, growing dimmer with each passing minute. Shadows danced around them, elongated and distorted, as though mocking their intrusion. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, and a low growl reverberated through the air. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. From the shadows emerged a figure, a towering silhouette draped in tattered robes, its glowing eyes fixed intently on her. Midnight reared up, neighing loudly, before bolting back toward the safety of the clearing. The creature stepped closer, its movements fluid yet deliberate. For a brief moment, Clara thought she saw a hint of humanity in its features, a flicker of recognition in its gaze. Then it spoke, its voice deep and resonant, carrying echoes of thunder. "You trespass," it rumbled. "Why do you seek me?" Clara swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet its gaze. "I didn't mean to cause harm. I was taken against my will, and Midnight helped me escape. We meant no disrespect." The creature tilted its head, studying her closely. "Your horse. She carries the mark of the river. She saved you." "Yes," Clara confirmed, her voice steadier now. "She swam across the river to get me away from danger. Please, tell me what I must do to make amends." The creature regarded her silently for several moments before lowering its gaze. "You are brave, child. Few would dare return to this place after witnessing my wrath. In exchange for your honesty, I will grant you safe passage. But heed my warning. Respect the boundaries of the forest, and teach others to do the same." Relief washed over Clara as the creature stepped back, fading into the shadows as swiftly as it had appeared. She hurried back to the clearing, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and awe. When she reached the edge of the woods, Midnight was waiting for her, her anxious whinnies cutting through the silence. Together, they returned to Dustmere, Clara's mind racing with thoughts of the encounter. She knew she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever, not when it held the key to protecting her town from future threats. With Sheriff Reed's help, she vowed to share the story of the Shadow Walker, ensuring that the people of Dustmere learned to live in harmony with the mysteries of the wild. And though the forest remained a place of wonder and danger, Clara no longer feared its secrets, for she had faced them and survived. The days that followed Clara's encounter with the Shadow Walker were filled with a strange mixture of relief and unease. She had shared her experience with Sheriff Reed, who listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to profound thoughtfulness as she spoke. Though he respected her account, Thomas knew the tale of the Shadow Walker would be hard for many in Dustmere to believe. The Wild West was a land of pragmatism, where superstition often took a back seat to survival. Yet, there was something undeniably real about the evidence Clara had uncovered. The peculiar hair strand, the claw-like markings, and the symbol carved into the mesquite tree. Together, they decided it was best to keep the full story quiet, at least for now. Instead, they spread word through subtle means, warning the townsfolk to avoid venturing too deep into the forest. It wasn't long before rumors began circulating. Whispers of an unseen presence guarding the woods, tales of glowing eyes in the dark, and stories of Midnight's miraculous return under mysterious circumstances. Some dismissed these accounts as mere exaggerations, while others chose to err on the side of caution, steering clear of the boundary that marked the edge of civilization and the untamed wilds. Clara, however, couldn't shake the feeling that her role in this unfolding mystery was far from over. Each night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling of her room, she replayed the encounter with the Shadow Walker in her mind. Its voice, resonant and commanding, echoed in her thoughts. "You are brave, child. Few would dare return to this place after witnessing my wrath." Those words lingered like a riddle, hinting at deeper truths she hadn't yet uncovered. Midnight, too, seemed restless, her behavior growing increasingly erratic. She no longer grazed peacefully in the pasture, but instead paced anxiously near the edge of the woods, her ears twitching toward sounds only she could hear. On occasion, Clara caught her staring intently into the darkness, her nostrils flaring as though scenting something invisible to human senses. When Clara approached her, the mare nuzzled her hand affectionately, but refused to venture closer to the forest, even when coaxed gently. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and indigo, Clara sat beside Midnight, stroking her mane absently. The air carried a faint scent of rain, though the storm clouds remained distant, their promise unfulfilled. Her father, Samuel, joined them shortly thereafter, carrying a lantern whose soft glow illuminated their faces. "Clara," he began, his voice heavy with concern, "you've been spending a lot of time out here lately. Is everything all right?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Her father had always been protective of her, especially since her disappearance, and she didn't want to worry him further. But the weight of her secret was becoming harder to bear. "I'm fine, Pa," she replied softly, choosing her words carefully. "It's just, I feel like there's something I need to understand about what happened. Something important." Samuel sighed, lowering himself onto the ground beside her. His hands rested on his knees, knuckles white from gripping them tightly. "If it's about those bandits, or whatever else you encountered, I wish you'd tell me more. You know I'll do anything to help you, don't you?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes, and she nodded, reaching out to grasp his hand. "I know, Pa, and I will. Just not yet. There's still so much I don't understand myself." He studied her face for a moment, then gave her a small, reassuring smile. "All right, sweetheart, take your time. We'll figure out together." As the stars emerged one by one, Clara found herself drawn once again to the edge of the forest. Midnight followed closely, her steps cautious but resolute. The trees loomed tall and imposing, their silhouettes etched sharply against the moonlit sky. Despite the warning she had received, Clara felt compelled to explore further, driven by a curiosity she couldn't ignore. The next morning brought with it an unexpected visitor. A stranger rode into Dustmere, his appearance striking enough to draw the attention of every passerby. He was tall and lean, his hat pulled low over piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His coat was dust-streaked but well-maintained, its fabric bearing intricate embroidery along the edges. Behind him, tied securely to his saddle, was a collection of odd tools and instruments, a telescope, a compass, and several leather-bound journals. The man dismounted gracefully, tying his horse to the post outside the general store. He entered the establishment, greeted by the curious stares of the townsfolk gathered within. Among them was Sheriff Reed, who stepped forward to introduce himself. "Welcome to Dustmere," Thomas said cordially, extending a hand. "Name's Sheriff Thomas Reed. How can we assist you?" The stranger tipped his hat politely, his gaze scanning the room with keen interest. "My name is Elias Carter," he replied, his voice smooth and measured. "I'm a scholar, specializing in the study of folklore and natural phenomena. I've heard intriguing tales about this region and thought I might investigate further." Intriguing tales indeed, Thomas mused internally. While Dustmere wasn't exactly known for its tourist attractions, the mention of folklore piqued his curiosity. "Well, Mr. Carter, you've come to the right place. This town has its share of stories, some true, some exaggerated. What exactly are you looking for?" Elias smiled enigmatically, retrieving one of his journals from his satchel. "Anything unusual or unexplained. Signs of ancient civilizations, creatures of legend, anomalies in nature, you name it. I've traveled far and wide, documenting such occurrences, and I believe Dustmere holds secrets worth uncovering." Thomas exchanged glances with the shopkeeper, who shrugged helplessly. "We'll see what we can do," the sheriff responded diplomatically. "For starters, you might want to speak with Clara Hayes. She recently experienced, let's just say, something extraordinary." Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Clara Hayes, you say? I'd appreciate the introduction." When Clara first laid eyes on Elias Carter, she felt an immediate sense of wariness. There was something about him, an intensity in his gaze, a precision in his movements, that made her uncomfortable. Still, she agreed to meet with him, partly out of politeness and partly because she hoped his expertise might shed light on the mysteries surrounding the Shadow Walker. They met at the edge of the forest, where Clara had spent so many nights pondering her experiences. Elias listened attentively as she recounted her encounter, his journal open and poised for notes. Occasionally, he interjected with questions, his tone neutral but probing. "You mentioned a symbol carved into a tree," he said, flipping through his pages. "Could you describe it in detail?" Clara closed her eyes, recalling the image vividly. It looked like an eye, surrounded by jagged lines that radiated outward, almost like lightning bolts. The carvings were deep, as if made by something incredibly strong. Elias nodded, jotting down the description. "Fascinating. Symbols like that often appear in indigenous legends across the Americas. They're believed to represent protection, vigilance, or sometimes warning. Do you think the creature intended to communicate with you through that mark?" Clara hesitated, considering the possibility. "Maybe. It did seem to acknowledge my presence, even if briefly. But I don't know why it chose me or why it spared me." The scholar leaned back slightly, tapping his pen against the spine of his journal. "Perhaps it saw potential in you. Or perhaps it recognized something familiar. Either way, your interaction suggests a connection stronger than most encounters of this nature." His words sent a shiver down Clara's spine, stirring memories she had tried to suppress. Before she could respond, midnight whinnied sharply, her body tensing as she stared into the depths of the forest. Both humans turned to follow her gaze, but the darkness concealed whatever caught her attention. Elias straightened, his expression sharpening with focus. "Interesting. Your horse seems attuned to something we cannot perceive. Perhaps she shares a bond with the entity, not uncommon among animals with heightened instincts." Clara frowned, her hand instinctively moving to rest on Midnight's neck. "Do you think it's watching us now?" "It's possible," Elias admitted. "Entities like the Shadow Walker often observe before revealing themselves fully. If it deems you worthy, it may choose to interact again. Until then, proceed with caution." Days passed, and Elias immersed himself in the study of Dustmere's surroundings. He mapped the forest, cataloged plant and animal species, and interviewed townsfolk about their experiences. Through his research, he uncovered fragments of Native American history tied to the region, stories of sacred lands, guardian spirits, and rituals performed to maintain balance between humanity and nature. Meanwhile, Clara continued her own investigations, spurred by Elias's insights. One afternoon, while exploring a secluded part of the woods, she stumbled upon an ancient stone altar half buried beneath moss and fallen leaves. Carved into its surface was the same symbol she had described to Elias, the glowing eye encircled by jagged lines. Her heart raced as she traced the markings with trembling fingers, feeling a strange warmth emanating from the stone. Suddenly, the air around her grew colder, and the sound of rustling leaves intensified. Turning quickly, she saw Midnight standing nearby, her body rigid with alarm. Beyond her, shadows shifted unnaturally, coalescing into a familiar form. The Shadow Walker emerged slowly, its glowing eyes fixed on Clara. This time, however, there was no hostility in its stance, only curiosity. "You seek knowledge," it rumbled, its voice echoing like thunder. "Why?" Clara swallowed hard, meeting its gaze despite her fear. "Because I want to understand you and what you protect. The forest, the river, the symbols, they all mean something, don't they?" The creature tilted its head, studying her intently. Few outsiders possess such insight. "Tell me, child, why do you care?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I belong here. Dustmere is my home, and I want to ensure its safety for everyone." For a long moment, the Shadow Walker regarded her silently. Then, with a gesture of its clawed hand, it pointed toward the altar. "Look closer," it commanded. "The truth lies buried within." With trembling hands, Clara obeyed, brushing away layers of dirt and debris until she uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the stone. Inside lay an object wrapped in tattered cloth, a small, intricately crafted amulet shaped like the symbol itself. As she lifted it, the air shimmered around her and visions flooded her mind. Images of ceremonies conducted by ancient peoples, prayers offered to honor the land, and warnings of consequences for those who disregarded its sanctity. When the visions faded, Clara opened her eyes to find the shadow walker gone, leaving only the amulet behind. Clutching it tightly, she returned to Dustmere, her heart heavy with newfound understanding. That night, Clara gathered the townsfolk, including Sheriff Reed and Elias Carter, to share her discovery. Holding the amulet aloft, she explained its significance and the responsibility it carried. The people of Dustmere listened in awe, their initial disbelief giving way to respect as they realized the importance of preserving the balance between their lives and the natural world. From that day forward, Dustmere became a place of harmony, guided by the lessons learned from the Shadow Walker and the courage of one young woman who dared to face the unknown. And though the forest remained a realm of mystery, its secrets no longer inspired fear, but reverence.